pay me in equity. That's a popular statement nowadays, thanks to mostly, I would say, Beyonce. In Beyonce's show or song Apeshit, she talked about being paid in equity. And she's basically talking about, hey, instead of just giving me this large lump sum of money up front, I want to get paid on the back end through equity, which is a very, very savvy move that people in different professions can take. And people are touting that message of being paid in equities and getting royalties as the best avenue. But I want people to understand all of the variables involved with making the decision to take money up front versus taking money on the back end by way of equity or through royalties. And I'm going to talk about the Jason Weaver example to illustrate my point. So there was a recent interview of Jason Weaver, who's the R&B singer most popular from the 90s. He also had a show on TV with Tia and Tamara Mari's little brother. I think it was called Smart Guy, but he was most popular through his R&B singing in the 90s. And Jason Weaver did an interview with DJ Vlad recently, and he talked about when he did the voiceover work on The Lion King, the original Lion King back in 1994, which was 25 years ago. And that'll be meaningful in a minute why I'm saying that was 25 years ago. But he's talked about how they offered him a $2 million payment to do that voiceover. And his mother was savvy enough back then to say, hold on. If they're willing to offer my son $2 million up front to do this voiceover, they may be open to actually paying him, a percentage of the actual back end money that the movie generates in terms of royalties, which was an incredibly savvy, even understanding of her to have that option in her mind at that time. So he opted to take $100,000 payment plus royalties instead of the $2 million up front, which was, again, a very ballsy and very savvy move. And so everyone was like, wow, that was a really smart move. That way he can, eat for many years off that movie, et cetera, which is absolutely true. But we don't know if that was truly the right financial move in the long run. Yes, getting money on the back end through equity or through royalty is great. That's oftentimes how wealth is generated. But you have to understand all the moving pieces when it comes to that. You can't just say that Jason Weaver's move in this situation was the right one, because we don't know at what rate he was paid for those royalties. Now, in the interview, DJ Vlad asked him, well, did you make $1.9 million, in royalties to obviously match what was offered initially at the $2 million? And Jason Weaver said, yes, over time, I did make the 1.9 million. He didn't say how much more over 1.9 million he made, but given it's been 25 years, I would hope he's made a hell of a lot more than 1.9 million in royalties, or else it may not have been a very good move. And what people got to understand is the rate of that royalty is extremely important, right? To give you an example, if you Google Pharrell, as in the Virginia producer, Pharrell, happy and royalty, Google those three words, and you will see that Pharrell talked about how on the song Happy, which did like 40 million plus streams, an insane amount of streams, he was paid less than like $3,000 or $4,000 in royalties for that song. Just think about that, right? 40 million plus streams equated to less than 4,000 in royalties. So people oftentimes grossly overvalue what royalties are really worth. And the other part of this equation that you have to think about is the time value of money and the opportunity cost that you're sacrificing by not taking $2 million up front. And I'm going to use the Jason Weaver example to illustrate this point. But when you are making a decision to take either money up front in a large sum versus money on the back end, you have to factor the time value of money and also what you sacrifice by not being able to take that $2 million up front and perhaps invest it into something that's safe but could generate income, right? And so let's give you a very, very simple example of this. And let's just say that the $2 million was a straight $2 million. Obviously, taxes come out, but let's just use basic round numbers and say that Jason took the $2 million instead of getting the royalties plus the $100,000 upfront. Now, it's been 25 years, right? Now, I'm going to give you an example from my own personal investment experience. I returned a 14% average annual return over the course of 7 years investing in stocks, right? Not mutual funds, not ETFs, but just basic stocks over the course of 7 years. And I spent about, I would say, 20 hours per year researching and doing trades to generate a 14% annual return over the course of 7 years each year, right? So not 14% all the years added up, 14% each year annual return, right? So 14% return on an investment is not at all unheard of, right? I'm a fairly novice investor, but I was able to do it and only working about 20 hours a year in research. But let's just say that you invest in something even safer, right? And so most people look at the average target return for an investment and they compare it with the S&P 500. Because if you were to just buy the S&P 500 fund, which is a very, very, very low risk and very safe fund to purchase and invest in, you're going to get a pretty modest return. And if you look at the S&P 500 since 1994, the last 25 years, the S&P 500 has generated a 7.7 annual return over the course of each of those years for the last 25 years, right? Some years it's up 14, 15%. Other years it may be down 3 or 4%. But when you look at the overall 25-year history, the S&P 500 has returned 7.7% return each year, right? So if Jason Weaver had taken that $2 million payment up front and just stuck it in a very simple and basic, safe S&P 500 mutual fund, when you add up that return over the course of the last 25 years, Jason Weaver's $2 million would be $11.8 million, which means he could have really generated $9.8 million in income without even touching the $2 million that he got originally. So he could have created basically a 6-figure income for him every year based off just the returns from that $2 million investment. And that would have given him what I call fuck you money, right? So he would have been able to generate a 6-figure income off just the returns of that $2 million, which would have meant that he could have never made another song, another movie, another TV show for the rest of his life. And off that $2 million, he would have at least guaranteed himself a 6-figure salary based off the returns of just that $2 million. So unless those royalties are north of $10 million 25 years later, which we've already established that they very well may not be. If Pharrell got less than $4,000 off of the song Happy, which did 40 million streams, it's not unheard of to think that maybe he only got $3 or $4 million in those royalties, which in that scenario, I would say that the $2 million up front may have been a better option. So this is not meant to knock the decision that his mother and him did to take the smaller lump sum plus the royalties, because I think it was a very savvy move and it showed that they were very sophisticated in terms of understanding the various options that they had, and they took a gamble, right? And it very well may have paid off. We don't know how much he's earned over those 25 years in royalties. He may be at 20 million for all I know. Who knows, right? But my point of this video is that you can't just think that, oh, because I'm getting royalties or because I'm getting equity, that automatically means that that's a better financial move than getting large amounts of money up front, because you have to factor the time value of money. You have to factor compound interest. you have to factor the opportunity costs that you're sacrificing by not having that money up front. So holla if you got questions.